Sup, y'alls? I'm Brian. I'm a theoretical gamer. Now, let's talk about clerics. Now, there's this big part of me, and I'm sorry to say it, but in standard D&D, clerics are kind of meaningless. I mean, yeah, they serve a function in the party, and they can be cool to play, but fitting into the world, a little weird. Now, let me explain. In an earlier video, I talked about race and how race is best when it means something. If you have a race that has something attached to it, that has a style or a personality or some really weird role-playing quirk attached to it, that's when they're best. But the word, like for instance, the big one, elf, is to me practically meaningless. You can say, someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, my character's an elf." Like, oh, okay. Different. It's practically. It doesn't evoke anything for me anymore. I mean, you might get some game masters who really make the elves feel elfy, and the player who is really good and gets into the whole, slightly aloof, alien, above humanity thing that that you got across with like the like in Lothlorien in Lord of the Rings. That slightly distant from humanity. That they predate us, and they were, and in some ways above us. That, but you don't get that in D&D. You get this, and every version of it has them slightly different, and it's kind of meaningless. And I've talked about this before. And I think the clerics are kind of the same way. Someone says, "I'm a cleric," and you think, okay, and you think of, okay, they have healing abilities. They depending on the version, they might have special abilities based on the god they serve. And clerics are not as meaningless as elves to me. They do, the players themselves can get very into the role playing behind the cleric, but the worlds that they live in seem to have this kind of blasé attitude. It's like, and the other members of the party have the same blasé attitude. I mean, this is a person who is essentially a prophet and is getting healing abilities from a divine power. And like someone's like lying there on the ground with a sucking chest wound, like, and so he was like, "I heal you, my son." And all like, "Oh," and they're like, "Oh, thanks," and he gets on with his day. That's kind of. Does anyone see that? Anyone else see how something that is supposed to be as miraculous as divine healing is trivialized in that way? Now, another thing is that, and it's like, assume that you go into any town or village and you look for the cleric, and they all have healing abilities, and it's common. It's like it's like a job, like, oh well, like you assume that any village of any size will have someone who studies religion and becomes a cleric so that they can heal people if they need it. It's not special. It's just, like you got the cleric, you've got the tailor, you've got the blacksmith, you've got the cleric. He just mixed in there with all the other professions, right? And logically, any society, would be so deeply, that society would be so deeply religious, and that it's not even funny, because there is actual proof of this, but that's, all right, let me give you a few examples of things that I like. Standard D&D or Pathfinder, it seems like, I don't know exactly the details of the worlds of those, but it does seem like clerics are pretty common. Now, some variations on D&D. You have Lamentations of the Flame Princess. That one, in the description of clerics, does tend to imply that clerics are fairly uncommon, and that priests are very common, right? Anyone can be a priest. They're the ones that set up in a church and give sermons every week, and and perform marriages and funerals and all that stuff, and all that usual priestly stuff. Whereas clerics are the ones that really are kind of like the prophets. They're kind of the holy warriors that go on adventures and go out and do awesome things and actually do gain powers from their god. And they're a cut above. They're uncommon. They're the ones they're adventurers. You know. Now I'm about to do a little mini review here for you. Dark Dungeons. It is named after the Jack Chick tract, and it is one of the, in my opinion, better D&D retro clones. It is a retro clone of the early old school box set, like the old red box, blue box, various color boxes that were later consolidated into the Rules Cyclopedia, the old Elf as a class style D&D. And this is published by Gratis Games, Gratis Games. And yes, according to the name, it implies that the stuff is free, and it is. Go to the website and download it. I bought the hardcover through Lulu.com, which he sells as cheap as he is able to. He basically, you pay the printing cost, and he doesn't make anything. This is a labor of love for him. So, and the guy who created it, he doesn't give out his name, but he goes by the online name of Blackie the Black Ball. Now, it is the and his goal was to make this as very, very faithful to the original while fixing any actual holes or flaws that he saw, and also to make it as complete in and of itself as he could. Right? So you have all the usual stuff about, your character can go up to 36 level, but there's also rules about becoming a god. There's also rules about, running a kingdom at high level, or even doing troops in battles between, armies. So there's a section about that. There's the quest for immortality. There's a whole monster list. Nothing that's copyrighted, but anything that could be considered a monster. It's very good. Now, to get back to Clerics, I like his idea of Clerics. It's like you have a god. What happens is this. Your god, because the standard idea is that your cleric gets up in the morning and he prays, and the god says, I hear your prayers, my son. Here are your spells. Right? Dark Dungeons assumes that what happens is, if you are a cleric, you have been invested. What happens is your god does something that it spends some of his godly energy to invest you as a cleric, which means the whole thing's on autopilot, which means you get up, you pray. By doing so, you tap into the divine energy of your god and get this automatically. And the god can de-invest you, but he has to use his energy. He has to spend energy again to do that, and it's probably easier just to kill you, right? And he doesn't want to do that unless you've seriously messed up, because it's for various reasons. Gods don't interfere directly. That's why they have clerics. Now, here's the thing. I like this because it kind of gets past that douchebag DM thing where you've had that one DM who, if your cleric violates the codes of behavior that your DM carries around in his head even slightly, and says, oh, well, you lose your powers forever. You're stupid. You played your character wrong. Of course, and it also, even if you have a good DM, it's one of the things I've had against clerics is that they can't be wrong. If your god doesn't grant you spells, that means you're screwing up. So you can't really tell stories about the corrupt or hypocritical priest, right? Because that if that was the case, then at least once a month or once a year they would go to all the priests and say, cast a spell. And if they couldn't, then that meant they have lost favor with their god. They were no longer following their god's rules. And they either had to atone or get back in line and, or, you know, not be a priest anymore, not be a cleric. So you couldn't be a corrupt, stealing from the plate or using your power for your own demagogue type ends. Plus, you couldn't get factions within the church. Like, oh yes, this is the Church of Bob. The Almighty Bob is above us, and he grants us wisdom and protection. Like, we are the Orthodox Church of Bob. We believe in strict obedience and following all of his rules, and every aspect of our lives are controlled by Bob. Well, we're the Reformed Bob Church, and we believe in much more personal freedom. Okay, which one actually has cleric powers? The original. Okay, that's the one I'm joining because that's the one that Bob is favoring. You know which one is following your God's rules so you can't have factions. The second you deviate, you know. But if you have two different but if you had the idea that, but you can have schisms within the church. Maybe no new ones might be created within the false church, but that's something that'll happen down the road. Or maybe the Almighty Bob will, grant both clerics powers because he likes aspects of both of them, and that neither of them are completely wrong. It's one of those, you never know. So, but even still, people tend to treat them like the medics. They don't treat them with respect, and they're common as crabgrass. Some variations might have them be rarer than others. And it's now, to give you another example, the new game. This is not a fantasy game. Has been described as sci-fi as fantasy, and I have held this book up in front of the camera before. It is Numenera by Monty Cook. It is technically it's been described as sci-fi as fantasy, which means it's got a lot of the fantasy feelings, the medieval type technology, but everything underlying it is sci-fi. Now, let's say if you decide that, okay, you make up a character and you're a nano, which is the one that has the weird powers that the Numenera and the technology give you. Like you're infused with nanotech that allows you to alter the world in some ways. And you decide, okay, you can get a descriptor. I take charming. He's very good at dealing with people. And then you get his focus at the end, who works miracles. He is a charming nano who works miracles. Works miracles is a descriptor that gives you pretty impressive healing abilities that you can lay on hands and heal people. So, and it's pretty cool. So, like I said, it's like, and then like every focus gives you like some kind of connection with the other PCs. And the connection says, pick one other PC. This character quietly suspects that you're a messiah or supernatural being. You can choose whether or not you're aware of his suspicion. See, and then you also get the whole thing of, all your powers, according to the canon of the game, are really technology based. But people may not know that. You may not know that. You might believe that you do get your powers from a supernatural source. I mean, most people in this world don't understand the concept of the Numenera. It's indistinguishable from magic level technology. All you know is that you can touch someone, focus, and he is healed. And so all of a sudden, in D&D terms, this character would be, okay, he's a cleric, he has high charisma. Okay, cool. And it loses a lot because you're just following the tropes of D&D that we've all known for years and years and years, and it's common. But you see it through this other lens, and all of a sudden he's this healer that everyone kind of respects, and maybe even is a little, they're like awed by him, and and he is a miracle worker. And that's what D&D. I'm not going to say D&D lost it on. D&D never had it. He was just the cleric. He always was. He was the guy. He was the walking first aid kit that no one wanted to play back in the day. It was so that's if you can take it out of the D&D concept, out of the paradigm of Dungeons and Dragons, and see it through a different lens, all of a sudden the idea of the healer, the cleric, becomes wondrous again, and I like that. All right, so tell me, make video responses. Tell me in the comments below. Do you? I mean, how are clerics? Do you think that if you run a game, you give clerics the proper respect? Do your players give clerics the proper respect? What what do they mean in your game? In your game, did you make a decision that clerics were just the healers or whatever? Let me know. What do clerics mean to you? Thank you and good night.